Hello, and welcome to Eastern Roman History. On the 9th of November, AD 959, the Emperor Constantine VII, the Purple-born, died. He was 54 years old and had been emperor for 46 years, making him the longest reigning Roman emperor up until that point. Unlike Constantine's own reign, the succession of his son, Romanus II, the Purple-born, was free from the trials and tribulations of the reign of his father. Romanus II was tall, thin, and broad, with sand-coloured hair. He was 21 years old when he became emperor, and had already secured the succession with a son, Basil the Purple-born, who was born in AD 958. In AD 944, Romanus II had married Bertha, Princess of Italy, to form an alliance between the Eastern Roman Empire and the Kingdom of Italy. However, the 10-year-old Romanus lost his first wife 5 years later in AD 949. However, in AD 956, Romanus II met the love of his life, a girl called Anastasia. She was the daughter of Cratylus, whom, according to the history by Theophanes Continuatus, was a local nobleman. Or, from the words of the historian Leo the Deacon, she was an innkeeper's daughter. Both report that she was extremely beautiful, young, and devoted to her husband and children. Over the next 16 years, two traditions appear regarding the deeds and character of the Empress Theophano, one fair, the other evil. Most historians, including Jenkins, Garland, and Sullivan, agree that the fairer version of Empress Theophano is probably the more accurate one, because the better version of her comes from an earlier historical tradition before the various coups and counter-coups of the 960s and 970s. The evil version mainly comes from the historical tradition that came afterwards, from Leo the Deacon and the lost sources of John Skylitzes. If you enjoy this video, remember to like and subscribe to Eastern Roman History. My gratitude to my generous patrons on Patreon. And now let us continue. The historian Leo the Deacon says of Romanus II, "On the whole, he was a good man, of pleasing countenance and speech, distinguished in appearance, and filled with every sort of noble virtue, benign and fair to all his subjects, but he was also distracted by youthful indulgences and amusement, and introduced into the palace people who encouraged him in this behaviour. The government of Romanus II was led by the eunuch Joseph Bringas, the Parakoimomenos, whom had previously served in several important posts with distinction under Constantine VII. Romanus II, with the advice of Bringas, appointed other loyal officials to important posts such as the Eparch of Constantinople and Grand Hetairearch. One of Romanus II's major military reforms was to divide the role of Domestikos of the Scholai, the chief of the Tagmata, who led the Eastern Roman Empire's elite soldiers, into two roles, one for the east and another for the west. He appointed the distinguished generals Nicephorus Phocas and Leo Phocas respectively. This change was likely in response to the empire's increased military activity since the reign of Romanus I. Eastern Roman armies were campaigning further away from friendly territory and had a far more aggressive approach to warfare with the Arabs. In AD 960, a large Magyar raiding force entered the Balkans to attack Eastern Roman territory. It was too large for Leo to defeat on his own. His forces remained hidden until the dead of night. Leo divided his army into 3 groups and launched a surprise attack on their camp. The attack caught the Magyar forces totally off guard, and the horde was annihilated. The few remaining survivors returned to Hungary. The thorn in the Eastern Roman Empire's side was the island of Crete, which by the reign of Romanus II had been in the control of the Saracens for over a century. Many emperors had tried and failed to retake the island, which was used for piratical raids on the coast of the Aegean Sea, but none had been successful. Romanus II's father and grandfather had tried to retake the island, but both had been dismal failures. In the last years of Constantine VII's reign, he had started to assemble the ships, supplies and troops required to reconquer the island. His son Romanus and his Grand Chamberlain Bringas now took up that duty. By AD 960, preparations were finally ready. The Domestikos of the East, Nicephorus Phocas, was accompanied by an agent of the emperor named Michael to keep an eye on the Domestikos in case of treason. The fleet, said to number 2,000 fireships, 1,000 Roman war galleys, and 307 to 360 transports, mustered at the port of Figella, south of Ephesus, and sailed for Crete, landing on the 13th of July AD 960. The landing on Crete was contested, as Leo the Deacon reports. When it seemed to be an opportune moment for disembarkation, he had brought ramps with him on the transport ships, which he had set up on the beach, and thus transferred the army, fully armed and mounted, from the sea onto the dry land. The barbarians were astonished at this strange and novel sight, but stayed assembled in place, and maintained their close formation unbroken to await the Roman assault against them. Roman commander Nicephorus drew up the army in 3 sections, studded it thickly with shields and spears, and, after ordering the trumpets to sound the charge and the standard of the cross to precede them, launched a frontal assault against the barbarians. A terrible battle broke out, and the arrows poured down like hail. The barbarians could not long endure the Roman spear thrusts, but turned their backs, broke ranks, and ran back as fast as they could to their fortress. After smashing the Arab army, the Romans besieged the capital of Crete, Candax. As they moved into position, they indiscriminately slaughtered those left outside the city, including men, women, and children. Nicephorus assaulted the walls, but they were too strong for his army. He decided to starve the Arabs into surrendering, but this was going to take time, and left his army vulnerable to Arab forces operating outside of the city. The Arabs in the hinterland would raid the siege lines, and the Eastern Romans would counterattack, burning and killing everything and anything in their path. Nicephorus had the heads of slain Arabs catapulted into the city to demoralize the inhabitants. Meanwhile, the Hamdanid emir, Sayf al-Dawla, had noticed that many eastern Thamata had gone to fight in the Cretan expedition, and believed it was a good time to launch his own attack into eastern Anatolia. A large army of 30,000 troops under Sayf al-Dawla's own command struck out against the Karsyanon theme, while another force, commanded by Naja al-Kasaki, attacked Hanzit in Armenia. Initially, there was little to no resistance to the jihad of the Saracens, allowing them to plunder everything in their path. The emperor summoned Leo Phocas from the Balkans and redeployed him to fight the Saracens. He took command of the thematic strategoi to confront the sword of the Hamdanids. He set up his army in the pass of Adrasos and laid a trap. The Tarsan component of Sayf al-Dawla's army warned him the pass could be a trap, and abandoned his army to take another route through. The Emir of Aleppo did not heed their advice. On the 8th of November AD 960, when the Saracens travelled through the pass, the Eastern Romans sprung their ambush and wiped out the army of Sayf al-Dawla. The Emir and a miserable remnant managed to escape back to Aleppo. Leo Phocas recovered their loot and was rewarded by Romanus II with a triumph in Constantinople for his momentous victory. Returning to Crete, as the siege continued into AD 961, the Emir, Abd al-Aziz ibn Shayyab al-Khattabi, sent messages to friendly Arab rulers calling for aid, but his petitions fell on deaf ears. Meanwhile, the Eastern Roman Expeditionary Force was also experiencing difficulty. Upon the approach of a severe winter, their supplies ran low. The empire itself had had a poor harvest, and so there was a general grain shortage in the empire. Furthermore, a long-running bovine disease called crabra meant the empire was short on milk and beef. But Emperor Romanus, with the help of Joseph Bringas, secured enough grain and sent it to Nicephorus' army to get them through the winter. In the spring, Nicephorus Phocas ordered his sappers to undermine the walls and battered them with artillery. A breach was made, and on the 6th to 7th of March AD 961, the Romans assaulted Candax. The city suffered the fate of all those that resisted. Once inside, the Eastern Romans began massacring the population of the city, inflicting rapine on some of the women. The Emir al-Khattabi and his son were taken prisoner. 1/5 of the loot was saved for the emperor, the rest was divided amongst the Roman soldiers. Candax's walls were razed. Next, Nicephorus established a fort on a hill called Temenos, from where his army went forth and subdued the rest of the island. With the fall of Candax, Arab Crete ceased resistance. Nicephorus put the affairs of the island in order. The remaining Arabs on the island who were not killed, enslaved, or fled were forced to convert to Christianity. Nicephorus also ordered all of the mosques to be demolished. Once Crete had been purged, Roman citizens were settled there and a navy stationed to protect it, re-establishing the theme of Crete. Nicephorus returned to Constantinople to receive a Roman triumph for his conquest. The emir and his son were given land, and his son converted to Christianity, joining the Roman aristocracy. The conquest of Crete also allowed the repopulation of the coastline in the Aegean Sea, with many towns and ports that had been abandoned being restored in the coming decades. In AD 961, there was a conspiracy against the emperor led by Basil Peteinos, whom desired to arrest Romanus on his way to the Hippodrome and proclaim himself emperor. However, one of the conspirators betrayed the plot to Joseph Bringas. The conspirators were tortured, humiliated in the Hippodrome, and exiled. A year later, Romanus II had them pardoned and recalled. However, the pretender, Basil Peteinos, had gone insane. Mad with guilt for betraying Emperor Stephen Lecapenus to Constantine VII, he had died in exile. Probably in response to this conspiracy, Empress Theophano persuaded Romanus to move his sisters and mother, Helena the Capine, out of the imperial palace to the palace of Antiochus. Helena managed to harangue Romanus into keeping her in the palace, but he had all 5 of his sisters sent to the Studios monastery to become nuns. On the 20th September, AD 961, Empress Helena died, surviving her husband by 2 years. Meanwhile, in the Balkans, the Magyars sent another raid to plunder the Balkans, which was defeated by the strategos of Macedonia, Marianos Argyros, the father of the future emperor. Meanwhile, Naja al-Kasaki attacked the theme of Melitene, defeated Eastern Roman thematic forces, and plundered the area. Once Nicephorus Phocas returned to the eastern frontier, he immediately led an offensive against the Emirate of Tarsus. In February 962, he captured the city of Anazarbus, massacred part of the population, expelled the rest, and razed the city walls to the ground. The Emir of Tarsus marched out with his full army to face the Roman threat. Nicephorus Phocas destroyed the Tarsan army. Although the Emir survived the battle, he committed suicide for his defeat. Nicephorus Phocas burned farms and captured many local forts before retiring to Caesarea on the Anatolian side of the Taurus Mountains for Easter. The Emir of Aleppo ventured to Cilicia to restore order. While there, he rebuilt the walls of Anazarbus and raided the Eastern Roman Empire. Meanwhile, Nicephorus Phocas, after Easter, launched an offensive into Syria, the heart of the Hamdanid Emirate. In November AD 962, Hierapolis was sacked and the governor and warrior poet Abu Firas was captured. In December, Nicephorus split his army into 2 entrusting the other half to John Zimisces, strategos of Armeniacon. Together they marched against the capital of Aleppo. Zimisces defeated an army led by Naja al-Kasaki and then proceeded to win a victory against Sayf al-Dwala, who had surged towards Aleppo to protect it from the Romans' advance. On the 24th of December, AD 962, Aleppo surrendered, save for the citadel, to its besieger Nicephorus Phocas. The Romans spent a week sacking the city. Once they had finished plundering it, they withdrew, laden with booty, having released Roman prisoners, taken many Saracen POWs, and left the Hamdanid emirate in tatters. Sayf al-Dwala, the implacable foe of the Romans during previous decades, was beaten. The emir now spent the remainder of his reign suppressing rebellions. The sack stunned the Muslim world, since the mustering point for the annual holy war against the Christian Romans had by that very same people been destroyed. During the winter, the Emperor Romanus and his friends went on a hunting trip in the mountains. Years of heavy drinking had left his body with a weakened constitution, and his rigorous exposure to the natural elements seems to have afflicted the emperor sufficiently to bring him to the point of death upon his return to Constantinople. On the 15th of March, AD 963, Emperor Romanus II died at the age of 24. 2 days before he died, his daughter Anna was born. That Theophano was supposedly meant to have poisoned her husband with hemlock, who was away in the mountains while in labour, makes the poisoning hypothesis seem extremely far-fetched. It appears that the Romans had no clue why the emperor died, and clutched at straws to try and explain his end. Romanus was buried in the Church of the Holy Apostles, and was succeeded by his infant sons Basil II and Constantine VIII, with Empress Theophano and Joseph Bringas as regents. Soon after his death, the sisters of Romanus II were released from their monastic exile. The reign of Romanus II, although short, was a great success. He had been left with a strong legacy by his father Constantine VII, and although he, like his predecessors, remained a civilian emperor, he appointed competent advisors and generals that prevented the empire from falling into disaster. Crete had been recovered, Aleppo's power was broken, and a conspiracy crushed. While Romanus II only acted indirectly in many of these events, it was he that took the decisions to make all of these successes possible. His premature death destabilized the empire, leading to the rise of Nicephorus Phocas as emperor. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like and subscribe to Eastern Roman History. Thank you very much to my generous patrons. The next video will be about Nicephorus II. And this has been Eastern Roman History.